Welcome everyone to this new episode, new edition of this Leadership Advancement Mentorship Podcast Lamp. And we always bring to you leaders and of substance leaders that has something to give, that has great value to add to this leadership community. Without wasting time, I have with me my friend today, a Maxwell leadership coach, speaker, and trainer, Coach Stevie Knight. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Dr. Michael. I am amazing and honored to be with you this
Mm.
morning.
Wow, glad to be with you. Glad to be with you. Yeah, today we'll be getting to know which and Coach Stevie is. Coach Stevie, and there's one Stevie Wonder. And in the in the music industry, everybody knows him. But there's one Stevie that I want people to wonder about today about you because we got some great stuff, some great leadership conversation that is going to add so much value to people. So tell us something about yourself, please.
So I'm originally from Vero Beach, Florida. Born and raised, moved into the field of corrections about 1996 with the Florida Department of Corrections, then transitioned over to the Federal Bureau of Prisons in about 2001. Worked my way through the ranks of the agency from 2001 to about this year, 2025, where I finished my career as the Senior Deputy Regional Director for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, where I had oversight over 18 federal correctional facilities, 6,800 staff, and about a $900 million budget. Retired in March, kind of made a transition, and currently am the CEO of Night Leadership and Professional Development, where we bring leaders together through equipping them with the tools and resources around leadership to help them quantify and qualify what leadership looks like for them and their team.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. And I'm really excited about you working in the correction center. At least, in fact, you got to retire in my city, Philadelphia. And I know that's a lot of space for leadership. You've gotten so much and I mean opportunity to really lead groups, organizations and all that. So tell us, how did you become aware? At what time in your life did you become aware of your leadership potential?
Oh wow, that goes all the way back to my grandmother. My
And when was
transition
that? Yeah, when was that?
in Vero Beach. I was born in Vero Beach, and it was one of those times where my grandmother took me home from the hospital. My mother had me when she was 15. My grandmother took me home from the hospital, raised me until I was about 12. But in those 12 years, she established such a foundation for what my life would look like as far as being a leader, showing up early. Early is on time is late, late is unacceptable kind of mindset just because of the time that she was raised. And then I transitioned into with my mother, which the dynamics of my life shifted, right? She was still 15 years apart from me trying to figure out her life. So I went from the comfort of grandmother's care to the transition into my mother's arms, which was kind of chaos, pandemonium, domestic violence, all of those things. And the transition of how I was saved was through a football coach who shifted the transition of my life by putting me in positions of leadership and seeing the things in me that I didn't see as a young man, by requiring me to lead, making me the captains of teams, requiring that, hey, you pulled me out of class one day and said you're running for class president. I said, yes, sir. Ran for class president, won. Sport was the thing that kind of saved my trajectory, even though sports didn't work out. It was one of those things that created discipline and structure, and teamwork and that mindset about building and lifting people up. And then ultimately, when that transition didn't happen with football, I ultimately ended at the front door of the Florida Department of Corrections in 1996, where you see it's a paramilitary instructor and structure, and you go through that process of learning policy,
Mm.
public safety, and how you have to deal with an environment that is significantly tough. And you learn that structure of what leadership looks like, but you learn it from a very formal perspective, right? I think back
Mm,
in those days, it was a leadership over their mindset because you didn't touch the leader per se who had a title or a position. So you learned that process. And then from that process, going to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which was a completely different system. And I saw the opportunities there in comparison. And from the day that I walked through the doors of the Bureau of Prisons, I said, here's where I want to go. And then it became a process of learning and growing and seeing good and bad leadership and wanting to connect those dots through that 24-year career. But it was centered not around positions and titles, but people, and connecting and relationships for me, with that mindset of care of people first. So ultimately, through the process of growing and even the personal transitions that were happening behind the scene, my perspective on leadership grew, because I
mm,
had to take ownership for me and my process of growth and development. 2019, I ended up, because I had already knew about Dr. Maxwell and his books. 19, I joined the team, so I was in the process of growing and development, and I wanted to know more. So that's why I became a member of the Maxwell team. As I'm going through the ranks, I wanted to give back to my people. So, in that process of growing and development and utilizing these tools that we have access to as part of the Maxwell team, I started utilizing those. And that's kind of the foundation of how my leadership perspective broadened.
wow, wow, wow. And we've killed a lot of deers in the last 6 minutes, so I want to unpack it. mean, I want to unpack this venison and break it, bit by bit, so that people can appreciate all the great stuff that you have shared. And I believe so much in simplicity, which is the hallmark of sophistication. Yeah. So, talking about this process, you said the first 12 years you were with your grandma, and can you tell us, did she call out that leadership inside of you? Because I believe everyone has the potential for leadership. So how did she spot that in you, and how did she call it out? How did she make you aware of that leadership potential?
You know, Dr. Michael, life is retrospective, right? You look back on those things. And when you ask a question like that, I have to say without question. But this was someone who had a sixth grade education, who was born in 1926. So her perspective of what love was empowering. I got to build you to do these things on your own, but you
Mm,
can't be that kid. And we've all heard that saying that if your friend's going to jump off a bridge, you're going to jump off too. Right. So it was one of those things where you got to lead and be the person out front. But she also taught me at a young age that if you're going to lead, you also got to be prepared to be isolated. There's a level of isolationism that comes with leadership as a young man, because you're not going to be able to do and go everywhere people go and do the things that everyone does. So you have to understand that sometimes you're going to have to forge your own path. And she started giving those lessons at a really, really young age.
yeah, but did she affirm any leadership potential in you?
Absolutely. I think
Yeah, how did she do that? Because we didn't, that part is very important, because she's like a voice in your life that you respect. So how we I want to know, how did she affirm that
well, it
leadership
wasn't
potential?
it wasn't in her voice, it was in her actions, right? She
Okay,
she
so
she was someone
how
who spent
what action really point out
so she
the
spent
affirmation?
50 years of her life as a maid and a custodian, but she did that in service of others.
Okay,
And she did that at a level of, I'm going to show up in these spaces and places early. I'm going to give my best effort, and everything that you do, you must bring the best parts of yourself to it, even when you don't feel like doing it. She
okay.
led that way through example. If you
Oh,
talk,
that's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. So it was more of like a modeling for you. So
absolutely.
you saw that leadership be model of our punctuality, of setting standard for herself, those values that she's affirming and all that. Okay, okay. We unpacking it now. I want people to
Absolutely.
catch it. I want people to catch it and get it. Yeah. So you saw your grandma, kind of like as a role model and just stepping up and doing some stuff and letting you see that this is how a leader should be. And I like that isolation thing because, and there's a place of isolation in preparation for leadership. And and those are the kind of things you begin to see. Now, how did you continue with that after leaving a place? And how did it continue? How did you sustain that momentum of that awareness? Okay, tell us what did you do to grow that leadership? Is it before you get to the correction and department? What did you have any opportunity to grow that potential before you, or it was when you get to that correction department that you begin to find opportunity to grow that potential
No,
of
that's
leadership?
such a great question, Dr. Michael. And no, that transition from my grandmother to my mother was
Mm,
probably in that space of chaos, right? And I call it chaos because it was very different.
mm,
It was that opportunity where in that transition, I had to make a choice. It was go left or go
mm,
right. And the
mm.
choice was, and I use this word, and I'm gonna say it's a real word, but I just made it up. I had to have an oppositism mindset. So I had to
Mm,
do everything opposite of what I was seeing around me in that environment. And then
mm,
I happened to also be a pretty decent athlete. So I encountered the Coach Bill Wilson, who would change the trajectory of my life, not only
mm.
by being a coach, but being a father figure who would
Wow.
force me to lead, who saw
Wow.
that in me. And he did that not just in word, but in action, and his
Mm,
accountability of me, in his direction of me, in putting me in positions of leadership. This was someone who had coached teams for more than 50 years, multiple championships for state titles, and never had a captain of his track team. I was his first. You're talking tens
wow.
of thousands of kids, and he saw that in me where he
So,
specifically said,
yeah, yeah. Okay, sorry to pause you now. Now you start with the grandma. So you now move to your mom, and you saw that this is like a contrast to what grandma was doing now. But you were wise enough to make the wise choice of still remain in that grandma's standard. Now you now have a coach that came to the picture and through sports. I mean, that reminds me of Mr. Leroy Washington with Les Brown. And that was like a father figure in his life. Yeah. So your coach like took it where your grandma left up and begin to nurture that leadership by putting you in position to serve and all that. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. So, what else did you do apart from the coach mentorship, influence, and all that? Did you do anything extra like reading, attending conference?
you know what? At
Or
a young age, no, it was just life's lessons that was preparing me for the opportunities that God had before me that I didn't even know about, right? It's all
okay.
of those things having to do and make young decisions as a young man that most young men wouldn't have to. One of the things I always recognize, regardless of the titles that I've had, and I've talked you through that process, is that my foundation was not built in the boardroom. It was built in the back room in the neighborhood, right? It was
Mm,
having to make those tough decisions as a young man that most young men don't have to make at that time. I understand
mm,
that I am the exception, not the rule, from my specific background. So all of those things start preparing me for what would later bring me into my professional roles as a leader. So when I showed up on the doorsteps of the Department of Corrections, my focus was to be everything that had been instilled in me. Show up early, show up on time, be knowledgeable,
mm,
learn, be quiet when
mm,
you're in a position to be taught. Even if you know something, you don't have to let everybody know you know, because in the moment that they're teaching you something, you may gain something new in that process. So you got to be open to learning. So all of those things were building blocks to what would eventually lead me to the Department of Corrections and opportunities that I would not have had if I was not in that preparatory stance of the people, that those two very critical people in my life.
wow, that was awesome. So the Department of Correction was the third space for you to learn leadership. and starting from your grandma, and then with this coach, and then you now have another opportunity. Then you make a quantum leap in 2019 by joining the Maxwell leadership, and that's a huge investment to your leadership growth. So why did you do that?
I was in the process in about 2019. I was still progressing through the agency of the Bureau of Prisons. I had already been encountered with some of his books, and I can't tell you the first book, but I've read a bunch of them that I had already had him on the back of my mind. And I had the opportunity of, around 2014 or 15 came with the Maxwell Group, and I passed it up. I just didn't want to make the investment. My head wasn't truly wrapped around making the investment. But the more as I was going through the ranks of the agency, the more I understood that I had to be in a position to grow more and learn more and actively engage. So when the opportunity came back around, I made the investment. And there could not have been a greater investment of time. It's not even about the money, of effort than to surround yourself with a group of
Mm,
people who are so invested in the value of valuing people and what that
mm.
means to be able to get in and grow and learn from all of those things. So it was a no-brainer now that I look back 5 years later, because I've 10x'd in mindset and opportunity and perspective around leadership and leadership growth just by being a part of this community.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So let's talk about your book.
Absolutely.
So, and I just did all that we did just to create a background so that people can have a context for the content, because I believe you are the message of this book. So the title of your book, I just love that title, Invisible Skills. Is that right? Do you have a
It is.
copy?
I
You want to
do.
show? Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's see if I can bring that up there.
Yeah, the invisible skill. Yeah. So why did
Yeah.
you choose that title, invisible skill, of all title in the whole world?
It's funny.
Now, please read the subtitle for us.
Uh, the invisible skill, how relationship centered leadership unlocks influence, impact, and growth. And
Okay.
the reason the invisible skill is because with leadership, it's often overlooked until it's missing. It's when you don't see it when for broken teams, you don't see it in silos, you don't see it. It's those times where leadership is missing most, when you know its value most, right?
Hmm.
So it's invisible until you get the impact from it. It's invisible until you see the growth. It's invisible until you see the opportunities and the leadership uh, opportunities to grow and develop. So it was that kind of was sitting in the back of my head, looking over the course of my career, and it just made sense for me. And one of the things that I argue is that leadership is a hard skill. I'm tired of us talking about it as though it's a secondary thing. There is not an agency, an organization, a home life, a church. There is nothing that is not significantly impacted by leadership, good or bad. And instead of us talking about it foundationally, it probably should be the cornerstone of what we do. So that invisible piece is when it shows up in a way that you don't talk about it. But when it's not there, you see the brokenness and you see that leadership gap that needs to be filled.
So when you talk about the invisible skill, you're referring to leadership is the invisible skill. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, okay. Now, here, this is what Peter Drucker said, the father of modern management. He said, only three things happen naturally in organization: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. I'll say it again. Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, says only three things happen naturally in organization: friction, confusion, and underperformance. He said everything else requires leadership. And that shows why it's actually an invisible skill, because at times there's a tendency for people to just neglect leadership development. And I've seen a lot of people just find themselves in position of leadership and they don't know how to lead. And in that kind of organization, of course, based on what Peter Drucker said, there's going to be a lot of friction. There's going to be a lot of confusion and underperformance. And of course, this leads to incompetence. So one of the great issue is leadership incompetence. But now you now went to another level by talking about relationship centered leadership. So why? Why? So I want us to talk about that topic, relationship. So what do you mean by relationship centered leadership? Thank you.
So I argue around three premises, what I call the leadership trinity: vision, purpose, and people. That you cannot lead if you don't have a vision of where you're desiring to go. I am one of those people who has a terrible, terrible sense of direction. I use the GPS in every facet of my life to get where I need to go because I will get lost. But the one thing I know about the GPS, it won't take me where I can't tell it I want to go. It has to have a direction. It has to have an end game. It has to, in that process. So it starts with creating a vision of where you want to go and where you want to take your people. Then I follow that up with purpose. What's your why? Are you doing this thing because you want a title or a position? Are you doing it because you're chasing that thing that is calling you in the middle of the night, chasing your purpose and trying to get to that why? And then people, it's about what our mentor says, it's the legs to your legacy. The foundation of the success of a culture and shifting the dynamics of what that culture looks like starts with the people. If you don't like people, you probably shouldn't lead. You probably shouldn't want to be in that position because the foundation of the success of any corporation, agency, family starts with building a relationship connected and founded in trust, hence the relationship centered leadership mindset.
Wow, relationship centered leadership. So what happened if an organization does not have this mindset of relationship centered leadership?
Well, one of the things that I tend to run into often is the first thing is there's a failure in communication. There's silos built where departments aren't talking across each other because they have gotten into this station of it's just us. We don't. The leadership doesn't care. They're not invested into it. You see, and the data fleshes this out. It says $84 million a year is lost when staff are disengaged from their leadership and you're not making the investment. So if I just talk to you about the profit and loss perspective of it, I'm talking about your bottom end and how companies flourish and grow. So if you don't invest and engage in people feeling psychologically safe and people feeling empowered, that there's opportunities to move beyond what they see every day. But what does that require? That requires you to be connected to them. That requires you to get to know them. That requires you to set qualitative expectations of where we're going and where we're taking you. Hence, I go back to the vision, the purpose, and the people.
Hmm. Wow, that's awesome. I love that relationship centered leadership because people are not uh engines, they are not instruments. And what make people different is because people have emotions. And when emotions come into the equation, it's a different conversation, and that is what makes leadership different from management. And because people, I've worked in a corporate organization before in which you see those leaders, they don't even, they have no, they are not people smart. I just finished reading a book by Patrick Lencioni. It talks about the qualities of an ideal team player. It talks about humble, um, hungry, and smart. And that smart is talking about people smart. And this is what some people call emotional intelligence, because dealing with people is complicated. You need to really take time to really understand people. One of the things I'm looking at today is I love to do crock pots. I like to reflect on a quote. There's a quote from Dr. John Maxwell that says, "What is easy for you is really what is best for others." And that is so true. If you look at it, it's easy for you to just judge people, profile people, instead of doing the hard work to get to understanding to people. Understanding people is hard. And this is where you have to get to the trenches to, and this is what relationship centered leadership is all about. Because when you talk about relationship centered leadership, I believe it takes time to build relationship. And so can you just speak to that about because when it comes to relationship centered leadership, it's not fishing, neither is it hunting. It's like farming. It takes time. Can you just speak to that, please? Give more
Sure.
weight to.
One of my favorite quotes by Simon Sinek, and he says, "Great leaders understand that they're no longer responsible for the work; they're responsible for the people who do the work." And
Yeah.
what that requires is that a leader's EQ has to be as high as their IQ. Right? You
Mm,
have to be connected to the process of what leadership looks like. And that means going in and getting to know who your people are. I had the fortunate honor of working at the largest federal complex, standalone complex in the country, had more than 50 department heads. In my first 2 weeks, what I did 2 weeks was I made my administrative person know I want to meet with each one of those department heads in a one-on-one meeting. I don't care what else I got going on. I want to establish the conversation and the communication with those folks right off of the bat. Not a one of those meetings went less than 1 hour, but my first question to them wasn't about what do you do in the prison. My first question was about who are you? What do you want? What do you desire? What do you see? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Let's talk about your family dynamics. And then we talked about the business of their oversight of what they do. I'm someone who's been in the
mm,
business 20 years. If I come into that institution and I just want to talk to you about the bottom line, I don't know what the heck I'm doing because I should already know what you do in your position. My first stance should be, can I connect with you? Can I get to know who
mm,
you are? Can I get to know what your desires are? And then can I ask you, what do you expect of me? How can I make things
mm,
better for you? Because sitting in that seat as a CEO or a warden or any type of leadership position, my goal should not be to be served. My goal should be to serve. Well, how can I serve people I don't know and don't have relationships with? So it's
mm,
expounding that, and that supersedes industry. There isn't a place that you shouldn't be able to go in and at least know the upper portion of your executive team, or there isn't
mm,
an administrator in a school that should not have a sit down with their vice principal and the administrators and sit down with that group and have a clear vision of where we're going to go. And with that mindset, well, where are we going to go with the end in mind? What will this place
wow.
look like once I'm gone? And have I put together a path of trajectory that will show what I've done? And when I've gone, my legs will be in the things that I leave behind, not in the title that I had.
Wow. That's awesome. There's no value in any title. Title is just a position and an opportunity to add value to people. And can you tell us where people can find you, and then find your book?
Absolutely. You can find my book on Amazon.com. You can contact me through my email. It's Stevie Knight at knightlapd.com. My website to my webpage is www.johncmaxwellgroup.com/Stevie Knight.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Coach Stevie Knight, for your time today. It's been a very interessante moment with you. I say it in Spanish. It's been a very interesting moment with you, just and sharing from your book, The Invisible Skill, and talking about the relationship centered leadership. And so we want to say thank you, and we just love your heart, your passion is palpable and very, very admirable. And I want to say thank you for your time today. Yeah. So, and we just value you. Yeah. So, viewers, till we come your way next time with another great leader with great content, don't forget, application is the key to transformation. And it's not all about gathering knowledge, but applying knowledge. Because when we apply the knowledge, that is when we can get the reward. Thank you. And see ya next time for another great podcast. Bye bye.